Tricia, thanks for being here. Really appreciate the time. I know what a busy week it is for you guys. Not that I doubt you've probably had a slow week, but I think the past several days have probably been more impactful for all of the different things that you guys are dealing with.
Oh, Sean, thank you for having me. Yes, the flooding in Central Texas, we've certainly been working full speed around the clock to get Americans in crisis the help and resources they need, but we pray for them.
Yeah, talk to me about that a little. Just what do you guys, what's the role? I know obviously FEMA falls under DHS, but what is it, what role is DHS playing in with respect to the tragedy down there in Texas, to the response and going forward?
So the U.S. Coast Guard was some of the first responders on the ground there. I think Americans can be incredibly proud of the work they did, as well as the local and state first responders. Almost 1,000 souls were saved. I think in these dark times, we look for the helpers, and one of those helpers was out of the U.S. Coast Guard, a rescue swimmer who rescued 165 souls. And, he came out of finance prior. His name is Scott Ruskin, and I think he can make Americans proud. But our role really from the federal government is to let the state and local government lead, but make sure that they have the resources and the communication and information sharing to get individuals the help they need. We actually also sent the Border Patrol down there as well to help with rescue and recovery.
Wow. I didn't even know that. Yeah. So this guy, Scott Ruskin, man, his story, it just sends chills down. I've watched a couple of the interviews that he's done. It was his first rescue that he had done. And he was so poised and mature, Tricia. I was, to your point, I was proud of our Coast Guard. I was proud of the job that he did, the way he handled himself, both in that moment. And the story behind it was so epic about how, he almost, it was like providential the way he was in that actual place in time, because other folks were doing different rescue missions. So what is it that you guys do now to highlight his actions, to talk about the rest of the Coast Guard and what they're doing? I mean, it just, that one individual, Scott Ruskin, popped out of nowhere to tell a story that was so moving.
It was so moving, Sean, and he makes Americans so proud. As I mentioned before, he was working in finance in New York City, and then decided he wanted to go and serve his country and do so at the U.S. Coast Guard. And in these interviews, he is just so selfless and patriotic and really embodies what the best of the American people are and what the best of the U.S. Coast Guard is and their mission to get Americans out of crisis. And so, we want to share this story and to encourage others to serve like Scott Ruskin.
You talk about the response a little. The president and Secretary Noem have talked about how they want to reshape the role of FEMA, kind of let states lead. What have you guys learned so far about the tragedy in terms of the roles between the state and the federal government when it comes to natural disasters and emergencies?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of Americans have heard us talk about how FEMA has been a failure for decades, but they don't really quite understand, well, what does that mean? A big part of what that means is the fact that there are still payouts due from Hurricane Katrina. Decades ago at this point. This has been an incredibly bureaucratic, DC-centric body, been slow to move, been slow to get resources to Americans in crisis. And under President Trump and Secretary Noem, we want an efficient, nimble body who proactively gets ready for these emergencies. We've been doing tabletop exercises and making sure we get resources down to locations we believe could be impacted by natural disasters early, so that we can quickly and swiftly get Americans the resources they need.
But I guess the question I'm asking is, there's a lot of discussion about dismantling FEMA. I don't want to put words in it. I mean, just reshaping it maybe. Where does that stand? Is this reinforce that need, which is, hey, we need to let the states go first, and then we come in secondly? The whole thing needs to be uplifted. This kind of tragedy and how the response happened, I assume either shapes in one way or another how we deal with FEMA going forward.
Yeah, I think we're absolutely still in the fog of disaster. We're still, there's still rescue and recovery efforts ongoing. So we want to let the dust settle and then reevaluate, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And how can we get how can we do better? How can we save more American lives and make sure that there's less damage? So I think that that's yet to be seen.
All right. Texas getting a lot of attention because of these floods and the disaster and loss of life down there. But there was also another big story out of McAllen, Texas. 3 officers that are affiliated with I guess it's ICE or CBP were ambushed at a patrol facility. Can you walk through exactly what happened in that event and what's going on since then?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a depraved individual who approached Border Patrol, the annex office there, and he opened fire on local law enforcement as well as Border Patrol. Had Border Patrol not taken such swift action, this could have been a lot worse, a lot of lives lost. We had a local law enforcement officer who was shot in the knee and 2 other Border Patrol personnel who were injured. Fortunately, none of them were life-threatening injuries, but the man who did this, the monster who tried to do this and kill our Border Patrol and law enforcement officers, he was killed and he was neutralized.
There have been also 11 people charged in an ambush on ICE officials that apparently they are now facing charges for this planned ambush. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, that was over the weekend as well. They were slashing tires. They were using fireworks to draw attention and try and bring in law enforcement so that they could open fire on them. But Sean, I think that there's a larger story going on, and it's this attempt by politicians, by violent activists, and by the media itself to normalize violence against law enforcement. ICE just itself is facing a 700% increase in assaults against them. We're also seeing massive amounts of doxing of these ICE enforcement officers, but also of their families, of their children, being put online where the spouses work, where their children go to school. They're being targeted. And this has to stop. It's politicians like AOC, like Governor Tim Walz, like Gavin Newsom. They've got to take the temperature down because we are seeing open season on law enforcement.
What is this? I just, to your point about like the doxing, these individuals are doing their job. They're enforcing the laws of the United States. And I've got to imagine that, like, when President Trump won, I had paid a visit to the border last year, and the number one takeaway that I had was the law enforcement agents saying, just let us do our job. Like, this is why we joined these efforts because we believe in protecting the country, and we wanted to actually do our job. I think when President Trump came in office, they finally could do their job. But now it's like, which I think is probably makes them feel great. Like, I get to do why I signed up.
Right.
But now you're seeing, as you point out, these coordinated attacks. It's got to just scare the heck out of these folks that they're being targeted because of the job that they do. Their families have got to be panicking. What impact is this actually having on the agents and the officers of ICE or CBP?
I think they're just going to double down. These are tough men and women. But to your point, these activists and these politicians, as they call ICE and Border Patrol Nazis, the modern day Gestapo, and liken them to terrorists, never mind the fact that these men and women are just doing their job. Department of Homeland Security is a law enforcement agency. We are enforcing the law. If you don't like the law, go and protest Congress. Don't attack our law enforcement. And to your point, just the human element of this. These are men and women, our law enforcement, who are mothers and fathers, their sons and daughters, they're people. And how does the humanity get so lost upon these politicians that they completely ignore that and just go after them?
Yeah, I'll add another name to your list there. Karen Bass out in LA, telling these ICE agents to go home, that they're not welcome there. I feel like it's embarrassing that you've got federal agents doing their job. These people, by the way, it's amazing. When she was in Congress, Karen Bass, they all supposedly stand up for government workers. And it's just now it's clear that it's only certain government workers that they care about. But what's the current situation in LA? Because I feel like until that spectacular bomb went off in Iran, that was really top of mind. There were, these protests. They were fighting back and pushing against ICE. So where do we stand when it comes to what's happening in LA?
Oh, we're sticking around and we're just doubling down our efforts. Who is Karen Bass trying to protect? Is it the MS-13 gang members that we're targeting? Is it the child rapists? Is it the drug traffickers? Which of these criminal illegal aliens who we are targeting and who are terrorizing Los Angeles streets is she trying to protect? Because it's certainly not the American citizens. So we will stay out there. We had operations yesterday, and we will continue to have operations throughout these coming weeks.
So for a lot of people on the, look, I believe President Trump was very clear when he campaigned. Secretary Noem's got a lot of commercials out and had some messaging about, if you're not in this country legally, here's the options you have to leave. But explain what the current status is in terms of the goals, right? So we all, I think, really by and large support the criminals and the deportation of them. The left and the media are freaking out about other people who get rolled up. So walk me through kind of like, how does this work when you say we're still on the job in LA or wherever, Texas or Chicago? Are ICE and CBP agents going out just looking for anyone, or is there a target and then it just so happens that other people get swept up in it? How's that process works and what's the prioritization?
Sean, our number one priority is violent criminal illegal aliens. 70% of those who have been arrested in the last 150, 160 days under President Trump, those illegal aliens, 70% have either convicted criminal action or have pending criminal charges. So these are criminals. These aren't some innocents that we're really targeting and going after. And I think that the American people, the media wants to force feed them that we're going after these innocents when we are going after the worst of the worst. I have to say, 570 known or suspected terrorists have been arrested in the last 150 days within the interior of our country. We all know it just takes one terrorist to wreak havoc, to terrorize American communities. But further than that, there's been 2,700 Tren de Aragua members who have been arrested under this administration. And for viewers who aren't as familiar with TDA, Tren de Aragua, it is a vicious criminal illegal gang out of Venezuela who was imported here. They rape, they maim, and they kill Americans for sport. They enrich themselves off of the sex trafficking of vulnerable young women, and they've been walking around with impunity for the last 4 years. That is who we are focused on getting out of this country, Sean.
It just seems to me, I was kind of scrolling through Instagram last night, and the White House put these headlines up from the New York Times about individuals that had been arrested that are child predators, violent criminals, etc. And then as I scrolled further, I realized it was a joke. The White House was spoofing the New York Times saying, since they won't cover these individuals, these bad people, as you described, who are being booted out of the country, we'll kind of do it for them. I feel like from your perspective, the job that you have about speaking for DHS, what is your interaction with a lot of the media like? Are they reluctant to cover this? Do they not admit that there's a problem? Do they just kind of stick their head in the sand?
We get hundreds, if not thousands, of inquiries every single day on our immigration enforcement efforts. Not one inquiry do I get about American victims or what has happened to American people under criminal illegal aliens. But Sean, there's one story I do want to tell. This is about a month ago. The New York Times came out with this story about this man from Jamaica. He was in New York, and he's been in the country for 30 years. And by all accounts, he was this great guy who's now getting deported. What the New York Times failed to mention was that this man who was criminally, illegally in this country was in prison in the United States for 15 years for kidnapping. This is the media that we're dealing with. Every single day, it's whack-a-mole, it's defanging, it's debunking, just really these lies.
Yeah, that's a small detail. I'm sure he's a Jamaica man. Because it blows my mind when you read some of the details of what these folks have done. They're bad people. And I kind of wondered what tactically and strategically, it seems odd to me that the left, including the folks in the media, don't want to they almost are undermining their own potential arguments by not saying, okay, well, those are the bad people, just don't go after the good ones. Like they're lumping them all into one category.
Yeah, Sean, I think you're right. I thought the Kilmaro Abrego Garcia narrative was crazy, and I think a total self-inflicted wound by the left and by the media. To remind viewers, this is a man who is not only illegally in this country, but he was a known member of MS-13, Prince George County. Their gang, which is Prince George's County, is by no means a red county out of Maryland.
No,
I would say it's
no.
a deep blue county. He was a known MS-13 gang member. He had been arrested in 2019, decked out in MS-13 gang symbols, had rolls of cash, was among other MS-13 gang members. And then he'd also been pulled over in 2021 with 8 other individuals on a 3-day journey from Texas to Maryland, purportedly, but there was not a single piece of luggage in that vehicle. That's textbook human trafficking or labor trafficking. And since a grand jury has indicted him on charges of human and labor trafficking, so this is who the left and the media called a Maryland man an innocent father. We saw Senator Van Hollen fly down on U.S. taxpayer dollars down to El Salvador to try to get this victim out and bring him back to the United States. The media has showed us who they are, and we'll believe them.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me. Because the bottom line is, just to be clear, if you enter this country not through a border station or on a plane with a visa or a passport or whatever, you are breaking the law, right? I mean, that to me, I don't know why this is such a difficult thing. Barack Obama said so.
Yeah. It's pretty cut and dry. Unfortunately, or actually fortunately, under the Obama administration, we didn't see the vilification of our ICE law enforcement as they carried out the law as we do now. And I think a huge part of this isn't even about, the actual deportation and arrests. I think that they know what we're doing. We are going after the worst of the worst. We are very highly targeted in these ICE operations. I've gone on multiple, and it's pretty remarkable the amount of intelligence that goes around finding 1 or 2 individuals and arresting and eventually deporting them. But I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that there's a huge degree of Trump derangement syndrome. They know that mass deportations is wildly popular with the American public. It was one of the reasons President Donald Trump won in 2024, and they want to try and vilify us and defang us as best they can.
So aside from the bad criminals, and I think, like I said, it makes total sense. That's for a million reasons. You start with those guys. There's been a lot of discussion about like farm workers, culinary workers, hotel workers. And the president floated some comments not long ago. I think some people interpret them as somewhat sympathetic. Walk through where they fall on the priority list and how that works.
Well, I won't get ahead of the president. An announcement to make or a policy change. I'm sure he will certainly make that himself. But I want to say that worksite enforcements really are the cornerstone of our enforcement operations. This is oftentimes where we find that there's drug trafficking, labor trafficking, exploitation of workers for cheap labor. So if we know that there's going to be a criminal, illegal alien somewhere, we will not hesitate to go after them. We will go after them wherever they are.
So that means, right, just so we're clear on this, if you are an agricultural worker out in the fields, or you work at a hotel, you're not safe. Your advice to them is what?
Self-deport now. The American people have so generously offered those who are in this country illegally $1,000 and a free flight to go back home, preserve the potential opportunity to come back to the United States the right legal way. But if you don't take advantage of that opportunity, we will find you, and you won't be able to return to the United States. So really, it's a generous offer by the American people, and I really encourage those who are here illegally to take us up on it.
And what is the response been from like business owners who, because I feel like everybody loves to talk about E-Verify and the problems with illegal immigration and the impact, but then you find out that some workplace has half of their workforce is illegal.
Yeah, I think that that's certainly something that needs to be looked at. That's something we're very much focused on, is the employers themselves. But this is incredibly unsafe for the employers, for their employees. If they claim to actually care about these individuals, they know that it's so much safer for their employees to self-deport than for us to have to go in there and arrest them.
And what about like DACA? The president, when I worked in the White House, seemed a lot more sympathetic to people who, were young and brought here through no fault of their own, but they're not citizens because their parents brought them or whatever. Is there any current change in the strategy or the status of folks who are here under DACA?
I can't get ahead of the president. I can't get ahead of the White House. I haven't seen any changes. They've been privy to those conversations. So I'll leave it to them to dive into that one, John.
Okay. The other one that I kind of care about is I do think there were some folks that fought alongside of us, particularly in Afghanistan, serving as interpreters or whatever. And there was from my understanding, at least an agreement, if not a full on deal, where if you help the U.S. And put yourself at risk, because let's face it, the Taliban was going to exact revenge, that you would get brought to the United States. It seems like that's end of the bargain isn't fully agreed upon anymore.
So there's multiple options for those individuals who came in through that program. As far as temporary protected status, it is temporary for a reason. It's meant to be short and under extraordinary circumstances. But of course, those individuals who came and helped the United States, we want to make sure that they're taken care of. So there's multiple different programs, and they can also apply for asylum. That's still very much on the docket for those individuals as well.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.